So good morning. My name is Mike McQuillen. I'll be presenting the rehabilitation case study of the Clintonville Federal Savings and Loan Association building using federal and state historic preservation tax credits. So let me begin with the building's location and a brief history. Here's an overview of the building on its lot, bordered by 3 streets and the Pigeon River in the city of Clintonville, population 4,600. Composed of intersecting circular sections of varying height within an overall circular form, the building was designed by Green Bay architect Quentin Hoffman in the contemporary style, with construction beginning in April 1965. The Clintonville Federal Savings and Loan Association moved into their building in February the next year and held an open house at the end of that month, attended by over 2,200 guests. And while I like to think that all of these people were willing to wait in line because they were fans of mid-20th century architecture, I'm actually guessing that the drawing for a television set was the equally strong enticement to come out that day. So the building continued to be used as a savings and loan and later a bank until it was closed in 2022. At that time, the property was donated to the Clintonville Redevelopment Authority, who requested proposals for its rehabilitation to serve a new use. The current property owners provided the chosen plan to convert the building into a restaurant. They also submitted a National Register questionnaire to the Wisconsin Historical Society and received a positive response that the building is eligible for the National Register for its architectural significance as an excellent example of the contemporary style. At that point, they decided to pursue the building's rehabilitation using historic preservation tax credits, bringing me in to complete their tax credit application and National Register nomination. And I want to say that Carol's article, Banking on the Future, Modernism in the Local Bank, was immensely helpful in preparing that nomination, so thank you, Carol. So I'm going to take you clockwise around the building exterior as I discuss its contemporary style features. Popular in the mid-20th century, the contemporary style rejected the overt use of exterior decorative details and applied ornamentation of earlier architectural styles. And instead, it focused on the integration of building interiors and outdoor spaces. This integration of interior and exterior space was achieved with the extensive use of glass, seen here with glass window walls. An additional characteristic of the style was an emphasis on horizontal massing, which is expressed here with the building's flat roof and wide eaves. Another element of the style is the use of solid, uninterrupted wall surfaces, as seen here with the fieldstone veneer exterior wall. The rear elevation. And another design characteristic of the contemporary style was the use of more than one type of exterior building material, which is seen in the building's concrete eaves and balcony, its fieldstone veneer, and its glass window walls. Contemporary style buildings also made use of modern materials in their composition, including stainless steel and anodized aluminum, with champagne and gold-colored aluminum becoming increasingly popular, as seen here with the building's original entrance doors. So the building was immediately recognized as a distinctive architectural design. This quote from the local newspaper was based on the architectural plans prior to the start of construction. And the photo below is from the Wisconsin Architecture and History Inventory, is from the building's Wisconsin Architecture and History Inventory record, which is the database of historic buildings and structures in the state. What's interesting is that at the time the photo was taken, the building wasn't even yet 8 years old. But whomever was conducting the reconnaissance survey recognized it was an important building and worthy of survey. So really, in terms of the eligibility for the National Register, this was a very easy lift because this building was an absolute slam dunk in terms of its architectural significance. So reflecting some of Carol's talk, the Clintonville Federal Savings and Loan Association is also notable for its design features that were specifically reflective of contemporary style financial institutions. And I'm not going to get into this too much since it was well covered in Carol's presentation, but in this conceptual rendering by architect Quentin Hoffman, you can see the emphasis on transparency. Engaging the passerby, showing the savings and loan as an inviting and unimposing environment. With its extensive use of glass, the contemporary style was well suited to serve this new banking ethos. Shifting to the interior, I've included an image of the original floor plan on the left with the existing floor plan prior to the rehabilitation project on the right. The building retained its original layout. The removal of the teller counter was the most notable change. And note that the building reflected the banking concept of the time, that there should be a minimum of obstructions between the customer and the bank representative who serves them. That's a direct quote from somebody's nice presentation. The only enclosed spaces on the first floor being the vault, a single private office, and the mail and workroom seen above the office. Otherwise, the interior featured an open plan. The use of fieldstone veneer on the interior provides the visual integration of building interior and outdoor space that is characteristic of the contemporary style, especially where the wall passes through the window seen in the upper photo. And here's some additional views on the first floor. The saving and loans prominently displayed stainless steel vault door is an additional design element typical of this period, as is the inclusion of a drive-up teller station seen to the right of the exterior door in the photo. The interior design also features distinctive ceiling clouds. And moving on to the lower level, this area also retains its original layout. Accessing the lower level is an open sweeping stair that is also typical of contemporary style financial institutions. Not quite as grand as the Youngstown, Ohio example pictured on the lower right, but very much the same idea. This is the former staff lounge space at the bottom of the stair, and the main room on the lower level. So I want to note that everything we've seen on the interior so far is finished space. Plaster ceilings, fieldstone veneered walls, tiled floors, concealed mechanical systems. And this is important to keep in mind considering that when the National Park Service receives a tax credit application, they will expect the proposed project plans to reflect the same interior character. And which is why I want to note two unfinished spaces on the lower level. The lower vault, seen here, and the mechanical room feature concrete floors and ceilings and exposed mechanicals. These unfinished spaces can be used to your advantage when planning the layout of your mechanical systems. In the case of this project, the restaurant restroom was planned to be located in the upper vault, and the kitchen with its prep and dishwashing sinks and dishwasher was situated above the mechanical room. We indicated in the tax credit application that any plumbing lines in the lower vault and mechanical room servicing the areas above would not need to be concealed, considering existing mechanical lines were exposed here, whereas in the rest of the building, ductwork or mechanical lines would need to be concealed. So before getting into the rehabilitation project itself, I want to pause here to discuss a point in my National Register nomination research. So as some of you know here, when preparing a nomination, you think about the building all the time, kind of obsess about it. And one of the questions that I was obsessing over that I couldn't find an answer to was, what was the influence behind Quentin Hoffman's design for the Clintonville Federal Savings and Loan Association building? So what I did have was his obituary. And noting that he had a daughter and sister, Bay, I sent her a letter. and a couple of photographs of the building, posing a few questions, specifically the one for if she knew the inspiration behind his design, as well as did he design any other circular buildings during his career? Did he produce any written reflections on any of the buildings he designed? And did he mention any of the buildings he was particularly proud of to his family? Well, she didn't have answers to these questions. She pointed me in the direction of her brother, who provided some information, including the quotes shown in this slide, noting that the work of Frank Lloyd Wright was an influence during Quentin Hoffman's career, which seems particularly appropriate today. He also noted that his father attended Expo 67 in Montreal and was, quote, very excited to see extravagant international designs. Her brother also informed me of Ron Smet. He was the vice president of the firm, who I hadn't found in my research. And he also told me that he had a portfolio of his father Quentin's commissions. So I bring all this up to mention, one of the advantages of researching a mid-20th century building is namely that there may be people out there with answers to your questions. So reach out to them and you may find yourself on the path of discovery. And one other story related to this, Quentin Hoffman's daughter indicated to me that his longtime administrative assistant was still living in Green Bay. And she gave me her name, and I've actually found an address, so I sent her a letter as well. Received a letter back, very excited, thinking, this could be a jackpot. This is someone who has firsthand knowledge of the day-to-day operations of the firm. And as I read the letter, she did say, yes, she had been Quentin Hoffman's administrative assistant for 23 years. However, she was hired the year after this building was completed. So she had no reference with it whatsoever. So it's a miss there, but very close. So getting into the rehabilitation for the proposed restaurant use. I'll give you the 10,000-foot view of the project. Referring to the proposed plan on your right, the most significant change was adding a commercial kitchen in the former bookkeeping area and building a wall to separate the kitchen from the bar and dining space, which retained its open floor plan. The vault was dedicated to the restaurant restrooms. The mail and workroom became the kitchen prep area. The private office became a private dining room, and the drive-up teller station became a takeout window. The lower level became event space, with the conference room serving as a game room. It largely maintained its pre-project layout, although note the wall constructed next to the stairs for fire separation. So prior to project work, these plans were submitted as part of the tax credit application to the Wisconsin Historical Society and National Park Service. The tax credit application, consisting of interior and exterior photographs of the building, a narrative description of the project, the architectural plan set, and a copy of the original architectural plans for the building. I strongly advocate for providing a copy of the original plans if you have them with your tax credit application, because it provides you and the Park Service with a basis of understanding of what the building was, how it was originally planned, and can also answer questions about what components of the building may be later additions. So I don't have complete photos throughout the building because they're still finishing work on the lower level, but I want to share these photos on the first floor. You can see the bar, and then on the right, the wall separating the kitchen from the dining room. And here are comparison views before and after the project. You can note the original pendant light fixtures were all retained. And a view from the dining room toward the river. And here's a better view of the wall of the bar and the new wall separating it from the kitchen. I will tell you that following the submittal of our tax credit application, the National Park Service did have questions regarding this wall and put our application on hold until we provided further details on how the wall interacted with the ceiling cloud. And again, another comparative view before and after the project. So I'm going to wrap up my presentation going over the conditions that the National Park Service attached to their conditional approval of our tax credit application, as these may be useful for your future projects. So before doing that, I wanted to mention a component of the project that was dropped. The stair tower, highlighted in red, was proposed as a means to access the event space on the lower level without servers having to walk through the dining room and using that stair that I showed you earlier in the presentation. In the photo, the two windows on the right would have been converted to door openings accessing the stair tower. And Park Service would have allowed this. As you can see in their comment up top, they said the location and size of the proposed stair tower were acceptable, but they wanted further information on the tower cladding. They specifically didn't want to see some sort of just typical red brick. They wanted something that would have aligned better with and reflected the building. Also wanted to see how the stair tower was going to interact with the historic building. However, due to budget constraints, the stair tower was dropped. Another component of the project that we worked out with Park Service before they applied a condition to it was the flooring. So in the building on both levels, most of the flooring is 9x9 floor tile. And the property owner, their original plan was wanting to take up the floor tile on the first floor and then simply polish the concrete under it, and that would be the finished floor. While I didn't think this would work or be approved by Park Service, my mind, and I always advise my clients, is if you have the time and you're able to switch gears on your plan, feel free to ask the Park Service whatever you like. The worst they can say is no, and in this case they did say no. I think the idea of having a polished concrete floor did not reflect well enough the idea of a finished space for them, considering what the building was originally. So in the end, the flooring, the property owners kept the original flooring on the lower level, and then on the upper level, they replaced the floor tile with 12x12 vinyl composition tile that represented the historic in appearance. All right, so the first condition was related to two walls that were proposed for the kitchen. The walls are highlighted here, and then they were going to be installed in front of the fieldstone walls you can see in the photo. The idea here was that they wanted, in the kitchen, they wanted focused on cleanliness and the ability for a wipeable surface. And Park Service didn't have any issue with installing the walls. They just wanted to make sure they weren't anchored to the fieldstone walls, with the idea that in the future, if the building use ever changed, the walls could be removed and the fieldstone could be re-exposed and it would be fully intact and not damaged. So the second condition was related to the vault door, and I actually thought we had a good plan for this. So the vault door entrance was going to become the entrance to the restaurant restrooms, and our proposed treatment, highlighted in red, was to wall mount the door where it'd be highly visible and still in close proximity to its original location. Because what we wanted to avoid was a situation shown on the right where, with the door maintained in an open position, you'd never see its front face and you wouldn't see its pilot wheel. So Park Service didn't allow us to do this. And they didn't say why, but I think I discerned, thinking about it a little more, that if we remove the door and mount it on the wall, it becomes more of an artifact than it's part of the building. And once we do that, it's easier for it to be, bless you, it's easier for it to be taken down and potentially removed from the building. So what they did allow was for us to reverse hinge the door. That way it's still attached to its frame, and restaurant patrons can see its front face and pilot wheel. So another condition was related to the historic stair and not wanting to see it negatively affected by our proposed cable rail system installed for safety to close the gaps between the vertical tensile railing components. For this, we just had to provide additional drawings, detailed drawings to Park Service. You'll see with the cable rail system, that railing actually sits in front of the historic tensile rail rails and doesn't interact with them at all. And on the lower level, we proposed adding metal rails to span the gaps in the lower level stairs. I've had to address this on other projects involving mid-20th century buildings that have big gaps in their railings. And I found that Park Service will allow you to add components to close the gaps, but just don't modify or remove any historic components of the original railings in order to do this. So basically, leave your historic stair completely and totally intact, and then add whatever elements you need to do to make it safe. All right, the last condition, MEPs, which I consider the granddaddy of all Park Service conditions because they cover so much. So with the MEP installation, so you don't have to read the whole thing, the long story short is that Park Service did not want the MEPs to have a negative effect on the historic building and that they must be concealed. So at our very first site visit to the building with myself and the property owners and Paul Porter, who is the Wisconsin Historical Society tax credit reviewer, we actually discussed the need to add rooftop mechanical equipment and service of the kitchen. And our initial hope was that the installation would be on the rear roof of the building, which is 3 feet and 8 inches lower than the main roof. So you can see the location highlighted in red, and that's how we initially submitted it to the Park Service in our tax credit application. We thought this was a pretty good solution, and as well at the time, our understanding was that the property owners would be able to, on the interior, maintain and reuse the existing ductwork and air registers without having to add any additional ductwork. So we initially thought we were in really good shape with both of these components. And then the mechanical engineer got involved. So the mechanical engineer and it was the commercial kitchen designers, they threw a little cold water on our initial hopes, indicating that the air handler unit, which provides makeup air for the building and operates in conjunction with the kitchen hood, would need to be placed on the main roof. And thankfully, at least, it was placed on the rear part of the main roof. So we then needed to assess the visibility of this unit from the streets surrounding the building and satisfy the National Park Service that the unit's visibility wouldn't negatively affect the building's overall character, which is really challenging to do with a building that stylistically emphasizes its horizontal character with a flat roof. So how do we do that? So the typical way to do that is to employ something such as a stick representing the height of the unit, often with a very visible red bandana or painted red at the top, held in the position where the unit will be placed. In our case, we did it with just someone wearing a red sweatshirt standing on a platform to represent the height of the air handler unit and in its proposed location. And then took photos of this person from the numbered spots that you can see on the map and submitted that to Park Service to give them, we thought, a good enough idea of what the visibility of this rooftop unit would be. Thought the submittal was good enough. So this is a response we got from the Park Service, which long story short was not good enough. What they're looking for and what they requested was that the mock-up really has to show the volume of the unit, which means you really have to hold some sort of stick or represent the positions of the unit at each corner and then take photos so they can get a better idea. So with that mock-up ultimately satisfied, I just want to share these photos of the unit in place. And we basically ended up back where we were from the first site visit, that the unit would be visible when you looked at the rear of the building, but less visible from other vantage points around it. So on the photo on the left, across the street from the front entrance of the building, you can't see the unit at all. However, as you walk down the street, walk down Hemlock Street, it becomes modestly visible. And then on the left, the view from 10th Street, it is only slightly visible. But then this view from the backside of the building from Roar Street, it is clearly visible, as it really would have been if it was on the lower roof as well. So moving into the interior, the best thing that we did was have a conversation with the mechanical engineer as he designed the system, which we found out that needed more capacity than simply reusing the existing ductwork and air registers that were in the building. And the mechanical engineer was great. He was a really thoughtful guy. He grasped the need to conceal the additional ductwork to comply with the Park Service condition. So on the first floor, he did this by confining everything, confining all the ductwork to the kitchen with air supply to the dining area hidden by the cloud over the bar, so that there was no visual impact in the dining room, as you can see from the photo. It was a great conversation. I learned a lot. One of the things that I learned specifically was that in this change of building use, the increased occupancy of a restaurant compared to a bank, that the existing floor registers couldn't handle the increased air circulation load that was required. By his calculations, he noted that for a restaurant use, there's about 10 times the required air circulation compared to a bank use, which I didn't even think of before. I didn't even know. And here on the lower level, his plan called for a single duct that could be situated within the existing soffit shown by the red arrow. So I simply wanted to share this with you so that you consider the impact of MEPs in your future projects, since they can be a challenge with the new building uses, especially if that use involves an increase in occupancy. All right, I'm going to go to one last thing to wrap up. So, mentioned the plumbing lines and using our unfinished spaces and indicating to Park Service that in the lower vault and the mechanical room, they would allow any plumbing line, any plumbing drops there would need to be concealed. Unfortunately, we didn't take into full account the bar sinks, and as the owner said to me, you wouldn't believe by code how many sinks and this and that we need. So the owner sent this photo to me. We hadn't talked through this quite yet, and as the other owner said to me, she says, when I saw this, I had a heart attack. And I was like, yeah, I kind of know the feeling. But what we did was, and I always recommend this with any project, show your cards to Park Service. We ended up having a conversation with Paul Porter and Liz Petrella about the best way to deal with it, and came up with this idea to soffit just the pipes in this room. This is in the main room on the lower level, with the idea that the principles that Park Service gave us was, follow the geometry of the room, so wedge shape would be fine. Don't do anything rectangular or square, nothing that's a typical acoustical tile application. We ended up coming up with just a drywall system with a curvable trim piece, and keeping the trim piece with about a 2-inch gap from the ceiling, so it kind of reflected the ceiling clouds within the building. So that was how that was handled.
You don't have an image of that, though?
I don't know. That's actually the work that they're finishing.
So is it that piece in the lower right?
Yes, sorry. So it's, so on the right, that is, you can see the wedge shape soffit, for lack of a better term, that's gonna be used to hide the pipes. And that is it. I'm up against my time, I believe, so feel free to take any questions anybody has for me. Thanks.
Is the restaurant open?
It is open. Restaurant is open. I do not believe the event space is.
What kind of food is it?
It is. I think it's they have. It's almost supper club-ish. So they have steaks. They have pasta. I have not eaten there yet. I've not gotten up there to do that, but it seems to be fairly popular. Yes, Catherine.
I always hear from people
you talk about the impact of some of these decisions that had to be made on the bottom line of this project for the owners?
Absolutely. I actually think bottom line cost-wise, there was no increases at all. For their bottom line, it was all positive.
Love to hear that.
So to be honest, the hardest thing with the tax credit process is just the time, the review time, and then addressing that. Especially once the project work starts, everything's just so go. That it can be difficult. As I've found with every project, and this was an interesting one because this was just conducted by a young couple. Everybody, whether it's a big developer or small building owner, they're very focused on the tax credit application before the project, and then once the project starts happening, they're just focused on the project. So you kind of got to remind them along the way of meeting all those Park Service conditions. Yeah.
Were those ceiling clouds on this side originally dark or light? And how comfortable was NPS with you changing them?
That is a great question. So Park Service generally does not care about color because they figure that if something's painted, it can be repainted. I believe they were originally all light in color. I'll be honest with you too, when I saw the ones painted dark, I was like, we didn't discuss that. But so I don't think it will be a problem, but yes, it was a surprise to me because originally the plan was they were just going to paint everything a consistent color. So, yeah.
I'm curious, the building was built in 65.
Yeah.
And already in 73, it was recognized as iconic.
I think it was recognized as surveyable for the Wisconsin Architecture and History Inventory.
But I mean, did the architects realize they were building something iconic back in 65?
I don't know if iconic is the right word. I can share this story with you though. So for anybody here who's done building research, you can go to Madison and the Wisconsin Historical Society archives, and they have the records of the Wisconsin Industrial Commission. Do I have that right? It's the Wisconsin, what's the full name, Dinah? Yeah, the E-Files, the Division of Safety of the Wisconsin Industrial Commission. And they would review a lot of the building plans for buildings that would have a public use. And it was interesting reading the file for this one because there is a letter in it from Quentin Hoffman to the reviewer who he knows, Larry. And he said, Larry, I know this is basically summed up as, Larry, I know this is very unusual. Rather than having an ongoing correspondence, which you see a lot in these files, he's just like, give me or Ron a call and we can talk through this. So they knew that they were doing, I think, something that when reviewed, it was pretty unique. Yeah.
You've mentioned several times that was supplied, we had to go back and do this. Does preservation architecture require a mindset of flexibility different from typical architecture? You have to adjust and move, and you have to almost embrace that challenge as part of the creativity of the job?
Yeah, I think there's that, and the advice that I would always give to any property owner is don't fight your building. Like, say you have a building and you have a use that you want to put in there. Not all buildings are conducive to all uses. So, the one thing I also suggest to property owners is remain flexible. The toughest projects are the ones when I go in and see someone completely married to their architectural, design and plan for reuse right away, and then say, oh, let's look at this as a tax credit project. It's kind of like, you got to maintain that initial flexibility, to make sure that everything marries up.
Can you summarize the tax credits that were obtained?
Yes, it's a 20% federal credit and 20% state credit.
It was on all of the...
On basically everything within the building envelope. So all systems, all the work that's done, 40% total credit. So, did somebody have something over here? Were you signaling, Matt?
I think we're out of time.
Oh, sorry.
So, thank
Okay,
you.
got it.
Okay. Thank
All
you.
right, thank you.